Before 1863, education in the Philippines was very limited. Most Filipinos had no access to formal schooling. The church controlled what little education was available. Schools were mostly run by friars. They taught religion, Spanish language, and limited vocational skills. The curriculum focused on obedience to the church and Spanish authorities. Filipinos were taught to accept their place in society. Critical thinking and questioning were discouraged. This system kept Filipinos subservient and hindered the development of national consciousness. The lack of quality education for the masses served the interests of the Spanish colonizers. The limited reach of education meant that only a small elite had access to knowledge. This elite consisted mainly of wealthy Spanish families and a few privileged Filipinos. This disparity in education further deepened the social divide. It prevented the majority of Filipinos from improving their lives and participating in meaningful discussions about their own country. The system was designed to maintain the status quo. The church and the Spanish authorities understood the power of education. By controlling it, they could control the population. This system, however, would eventually be challenged by Filipinos who sought a better future for their nation. The late 19th century saw a rise in the number of wealthy Filipino families sending their sons to study in Europe. This exposure to European education had a profound impact. These young men encountered liberal ideas and witnessed firsthand the progress of industrialized nations. They learned about concepts like liberty, equality, and nationalism. They began to question the oppressive colonial system back home. The writings of European Enlightenment thinkers resonated deeply with their experiences. These students returned to the Philippines with a newfound sense of purpose. They were determined to bring about change and uplift their countrymen. This exposure to European education created a generation of Filipinos who saw a different path for their nation. They understood that education was key to progress and liberation. They sought to challenge the church's monopoly on knowledge. Their experiences abroad planted the seeds for the Philippine nationalist movement. These returning students became instrumental in disseminating new ideas and advocating for reform. They used their education to awaken the consciousness of their countrymen. The clash between their aspirations and the realities of the colonial system was inevitable. The propaganda movement was a literary and cultural movement that emerged in the late 19th century. Filipino intellectuals, many of whom had studied abroad, used their writings to expose the injustices of Spanish colonial rule. They published articles, essays, and novels that called for reforms and greater autonomy for the Philippines. Newspapers like La Solidaridad became platforms for their ideas. They advocated for representation in the Spanish Cortes, freedom of speech, and equality between Filipinos and Spaniards. The movement sought to raise awareness about the plight of the Philippines in Spain and internationally. The propaganda movement was crucial in shaping Filipino national consciousness. It gave voice to the grievances of the people and fostered a sense of unity among Filipinos. Although it primarily advocated for reforms within the Spanish colonial system, it laid the groundwork for a more radical movement demanding complete independence. While the propaganda movement ultimately failed to achieve its immediate goals of reform, its impact was far-reaching. It instilled a sense of pride and patriotism in Filipinos. It also inspired a new generation of leaders who would eventually take up arms against Spanish rule. José Rizal, a prominent figure in the propaganda movement, became a national hero of the Philippines. His novels, Noli tangere and filibusterismo, exposed the abuses of the Spanish friars and the colonial government. These novels sparked outrage and ignited the spirit of nationalism among Filipinos. Rizal's return to the Philippines in 1892 marked a turning point. He established the Liga Filipina, a civic organization that advocated for peaceful reforms. However, his presence was seen as a threat by the Spanish authorities. Rizal was arrested and later executed on December 30, 1896 on charges of sedition. Rizal's death became a rallying cry for the Philippine Revolution. His martyrdom fueled the flames of resistance against Spanish rule. Filipinos from all walks of life were inspired by his courage and sacrifice. They took up arms, determined to fight for the freedom he envisioned. José Rizal, through his writings and his death, became a symbol of hope and inspiration for the Filipino people. He awakened their national consciousness and ignited their desire for freedom. His legacy continues to shape the Philippines today, reminding Filipinos of their struggle for independence and the importance of fighting for justice and equality.